Merry Christmas, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of Hawk After Dark. I thought I'd, Christmas it up a little bit for everybody. We got Timothy, the gay nutcracker, hanging out, keeping an eye on things. And I was going to try to do the whole episode with that beard thing on, but it's incredibly uncomfortable because it's incredibly cheap and crappy. But anyway, thanks again for everybody who's watching this. If you're watching this one, that means that you are an active subscriber to my podcasts, and I appreciate that greatly. So this episode is going to be a continuation of this week's episodes of Hawk Droppings and Full Potato Friday. And this episode, Hawk After Dark, is going to be part 3. The first 2 parts I've gone through. I've been going through the current episode, the January, February 2024 episode. Edition, I guess, of the Atlantic magazine. That's simply titled, "If Trump Wins, What's Going to Happen to the United States and the World if Donald Trump wins re-election in 2024. And they took 24 of their best writers, and each of those writers wrote an essay or an article. And so in this week's Hawk Droppings, I did 8 of those articles. In this week's Full Potato Friday, I did another 8. And in this episode of Hawk After Dark, I'm going to do the last 8 articles. These have been very challenging to read and talk about. It hasn't been thoroughly pleasant, to be honest with you, contemplating the things that could potentially happen to our country, our culture, our society, everything within it, and what could happen to the rest of the world if Donald Trump is reelected. And fortunately, so I'm recording this on Friday, December 15th. And as you can see, it is dark out. So it is Hawk After Dark. Today's December 15th. And fortunately, the House and the Senate have passed a bill. One of the articles that I'm going to talk about in here has to do with NATO. Because Donald Trump has basically said he's going to pull us out of NATO. He's going to seriously reevaluate NATO. He hates NATO. He doesn't like NATO because NATO is mean to his best friend, Vladimir Putin. Oh, and I have my Flat Hawk mug, which you can get at hawkmerchstore.com, along with about 65 other incredible, amazing items. And we've just added stickers and magnets. All right. The first article that I'm going to talk about today is Trump's polarization of science is bad for everyone. And when we hear that headline, the first thing we all think about is COVID. But just remember the first thing that Donald Trump did before COVID, when that hurricane was coming towards the southeast and nowhere near the state of Alabama, and Donald Trump held up an official map from the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and he augmented it with a Sharpie. You remember that? Sharpie Gate? It's going up this way, and he's like, "Oh, let's get Alabama in there." and the best part, and he did that publicly without talking to them. And so they were like, "Oh God." And they basically changed their forecast based on what he did with a Sharpie in the Oval Office because he's the president. And so he learned from that he could bully science too, along with everything else that he was bullying. And then it's like you get to the pandemic and it's like, my God, where do you even start? It's like, on the one hand, he's trying to say that we're the best. We responded the best. Nobody responded better than us. While at the same time, he's standing at that freaking podium talking about hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and plasma and ultraviolet lights and bleach. He hated masks. He railed against masks. He thought masks were a sign of weakness. And at the same time, he demanded credit for the vaccine, and he took the vaccine and the booster, as did Ron DeSantis. And Ron DeSantis just like turbocharged all of this shit in Florida, man, and then lied about all their numbers. And, Florida had one of the worst outcomes for COVID from any state. And, if he gets reelected, I mean, what was the result of some of that? Republicans don't trust science now. Their voting base does not trust science at all. Democrats, their trust in science increased over the course of the pandemic. Republicans, it cratered. I mean, after the vaccines became available, the death rates in red counties skyrocketed, and in blue counties, they went down. There's so many jokes that I could make right there, but I feel like maybe that would be insensitive. I mean, fuck, I had COVID twice. Both times was very, very bad. Once before vaccines were available and once after, but I'm still here and I'm still alive and my brain works and I can walk and talk. And so vaccines work. That's the thing. That's the thing about science. That's the beautiful thing about science. Science doesn't give a shit if you believe in it or not. It's still true. Unlike religion. But Trump is all about money, and he's all about making his rich friends happy. And what science do Donald Trump's rich friends hate? They hate all the science that has anything to do with environmental protection. And so a second Trump term would involve an absolute massive crackdown and dismissal of the EPA and everything that goes along with that. Not to mention if we do, I mean, imagine if he gets reelected and we do have another coronavirus type pandemic. I guess one of the things that I'm angriest about when it comes to Donald Trump is he made it okay to be very loudly, very publicly, very enthusiastically stupid. And many of his followers followed along with that 100%. They're just like, oh, I get to be a moron now and I get to do it out loud in public. Okay. The next article for this edition of Hawk After Dark, it's written by a woman named Sophie Gilbert. 4 more years of unchecked misogyny. In a second Trump term, women would once again be targets. Trump's version of misogyny isn't like a hatred of women, like, that we see at like the incel level in society. He doesn't hate women. His requirement for women is that they look and behave a certain way, they comply with his desires, and submit to what he thinks their required social functions are. Basically like playmates and spokesmodels. I mean, I've lost track of how many women have accused him of sexual assault at this point. He's lost to E. Jean Carroll in civil court for rape once. He owes her $5 million. There's a second trial for additional defamation comments that he made about her starts next month in January. And I think this time she's asking for $10 million. And again, he's already been found liable for making those comments. So that trial is just going to be about money. Just like the trial that wrapped up today for Rudy Giuliani. He was found liable for defamation before the trial even started. And then he got tagged with a $148 million jury verdict today for what he said about Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. Donald Trump doesn't like it when women challenge him. Donald Trump especially doesn't like it when women of color challenge him. And think about what he's dealing with right now. So for him, it's like his misogyny is just like, just be seen and not heard kind of thing. But when black women in particular refuse to abide by that and do things like prosecute him in Fulton County, Georgia, or oversee his January 6th trial in criminal case in Washington, D.C., or as the attorney general for the state of New York, sue him for $250 million. Where again, in that trial as well, he was found liable for a decade's worth of fraud before the trial even started. And that trial's just about money. It's Letitia James, Judge Tanya Chutkan, and Fani Willis, 3 black women who are causing him an exorbitant amount of consternation in recent months. He doesn't like women who stand up to him. He especially doesn't like black women who stand up to him. Look at what, and again, look at what he and Rudy Giuliani did to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss in Fulton County, Georgia, the 2 election workers who just tagged Rudy for $148 million today. All black women, man. And again, he's backing away from this because he's going to have to for the general election, because this is not a position that the general electorate is on board with. He started off by saying, I'm responsible for killing Roe versus Wade with my Supreme Court picks. And now he has seen how the electorate responds to that. He's like, oh, I'm not going to win if I keep saying that out loud, because every time it's on a ballot referendum on a statewide election day, it loses 60-40 at least. And so he's struggling with that a little bit, but and then it's like, then we have when you combine him with Elon Musk taking over Twitter and bringing back people like Andrew Tate and Alex Jones, and it's the trollish misogyny throughout our society, and especially online, is going to get dramatically worse if he's reelected. Yeah, that was an unpleasant article to read. Then we get to the topic of journalism. I believe that journalism in America has done an absolutely atrocious job of covering Donald Trump. When you look at how they covered him during the 2016 campaign, they covered him like it was a show. I mean, like CNN used to air all of his rallies live, just giving him hundreds of millions of dollars worth of free airtime during an active presidential campaign. They didn't do that for Hillary. And, it's been incredibly challenging for American news outlets to just call him what he is, which is a liar. They'll say, well, he said X, Y, and Z, and we'll fact check that so that it doesn't look like that actually turned out to be true. Instead of just saying, yeah, he's a liar. The dude's a liar. He's just an inveterate liar. They just wouldn't use that word for him for so many years. And then, the reality is, when it's an economic decision for networks and newspapers, as soon as Trump left office, readers and viewers disappeared. Within a month, the Washington Post lost a quarter of its unique visitors, and CNN lost 45% of its primetime audience. And when he returned as a presidential candidate and a criminal defendant, cable news network ratings climbed again, and unique visitors came back to places like the Washington Post website. And, and it's getting back to him being a liar thing. So much of what Trump does as a candidate, as a human, as a president, is to destroy the very notion of objective truth. How do you cover that as a journalist? How do you cover that as a journalist who's not concerned about the economic side of things, let alone if you're running a newspaper or a cable news network and you are concerned about the economic side of things. And there's a guy, he's a professor for Harvard. His name's Timothy Snyder, and you know, towards the beginning of Trump's first term, he wrote a thin book just called On Tyranny. And towards the beginning of that book, is like truth is one of the first things to go. You know, under tyranny, there is no objective truth. It doesn't exist. Truth is whatever the leader says is true, and that's what Donald Trump wants. You know, what is truth in North Korea? What is truth in Russia? What is truth in Iran? It's scary shit to think about, man. But I mean, it, God, and you know, and he's already started squawking about what he wants to do to his second in his second term to media organizations that he doesn't like or cover him in ways that he doesn't appreciate or doesn't approve of. You know, and in line with Project 2025 and replacing all employees throughout the federal bureaucracy, who do you think he's going to staff the Federal Communications Commission with? The governmental department that oversees NBC and Comcast and Fox News and Time Warner and all of that stuff. And it's just think about that. Think about if he gets reelected and takes MSNBC off the air, for an example. That's just there's one former Trump official who, speaking on background, was like, one of the first things that they're going to do if Trump gets reelected is redo the entire White House press corps who covers the president. You know, they're going to decide in purely partisan loyalty fashion who gets in the press secretary's room and who doesn't, who gets a White House press pass and who doesn't. Do we like your coverage? No, you're not getting a press pass. You're not getting in. And, you know, and I mean, throughout this, I've been talking a lot about Viktor Orban. He's the president or prime minister of Hungary. And Viktor Orban, you know, he's just shy of being a dictator at this point. He first came into power in 2010. So he's been in there, you know, 13 years or so. He didn't do his dictator autocracy stuff during his first term. He did it after he got reelected in his second term. That's when he started it. And one of the first things he started with was the media. And he seized control of some media companies, sold them to friends of his, crushed independent media through regulation and things like that. And they killed the news outlets that they didn't like. And they killed independent media and independent journalism throughout Hungary. There is no more independent journalism or independent media in Hungary. It's all basically state sponsored at this point. And that's what Trump wants. How is American media going to cover that? How are they going to push back on it? How are they going to protect themselves? I don't know, but it's scary. And the next article is by a woman named Megan Garber, and it's simply called "The Truth Won't Matter." And for some reason, when I printed this article, the print came out very tiny, so Santa has to put on his readers. And just think about Donald Trump. I mean, he lied, 35,000 times during his first term. I mean, it was something like 200 a day or some shit like that. I don't remember. But facts are work. They require study. They require curiosity. They require patience. They require humility. Characteristics which Donald Trump and his supporters simply do not have. Democracy requires the same. The demands of both become greater in an information environment teeming with stories that are ever more suspect, a place where truth has plausible deniability. I, I mean, eh, eh, Trump says that everybody and everything lies except him, and his followers believe that everybody is lying to you but me. And they're like, yeah, yeah, and he lies more than literally anybody. His followers fucking suck it up, man. I don't even get it. I don't get it. Um, Trump, having lived his life as an endless ad, has mastered the art of problem making. You know, he's the arsonist who shows up at a house fire, puts out the fire that he started, and demands to be treated like a hero for putting out the fire. That's Donald Trump. And that's Donald Trump as president. And there was a great line in this article. We are divided between those who think with their head and those who know with their heart. That's when Stephen Colbert was on the Daily Show as Stephen Colbert, the character, when he was, basically Bill O'Reilly. And he wrote that line as a joke, as an absurd joke, but it was prophetic. I mean, it was really prophetic. And Trump just appeals to emotion, and he interprets liberty as freedom from facts. So truth is in trouble. Facts are in trouble under Fat Nixon, little Donnie Two Scoops, comb over Caligula, tangerine tits. Donald Trump versus American history. I mean, his followers in the South still love their Confederate flag. They think Robert E. Lee was a military genius. Donald Trump was very angry that the military was going to change the names of military bases that were named after Confederate generals. And don't get me started on the 2020 election in January 6th and historical revision of those two items. I mean, what Trump and the MAGA movement want is a country where children are falsely taught that the United States has always been a beacon of righteousness. Slavery, Jim Crow, indigenous displacement and slaughter, anti-immigrant laws, the suppression of women's rights, and the history of violence against the LGBTQ community, these things sully the MAGA version of American history. One thing where it's like, I feel like he does kind of need to give Ron DeSantis some credit. Trump wants to take what Ron DeSantis has done to the public education system in Florida and do that nationwide. He has said that he is going to defund public schools K through 12 and at the collegiate level if those schools teach or reference critical race theory, which I'm sure under Trump would have an expansive definition to include slavery and why was there a civil war. Schools that teach anything about LGBTQ community or issues, and schools that teach anything about gender ideology. He's going to yank all of their public funds from them. He's going to veto that shit. Because why not? I mean, and it's like, I love, God, I love these lost cause, Civil War dead enders who still say the Civil War was about states' rights. And, it's like, well, states' rights to do what? That's right, own people. And they forget that almost all of the southern states that seceded from the Union put out declarations of secession. Here's why we're doing this. And in almost every single one of those, they reference the importance of slavery and maintaining slavery. And in 1861, the state of Mississippi put out a declaration of secession, and it included the following sentence: our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest in the world. States' rights. Yeah, exactly. And, If Trump gets reelected, being a teacher in the United States of America in 2025 or 2026 is going to be like being an OBGYN in a red state today that has banned abortion. It's like, how do you do your job? How do you do your job? And remember, at the end of his term, he announced this thing called the 1776 Commission, which was, meant to be a rebuttal to, I don't want to get the year wrong. I just saw it. It was meant to be a rebuttal to the 1619 Project, which was about 1619 was the year that the first African slaves were brought to what would become the United States of America. And, so he announced this 1776 commission that was going to teach you that the history of the United States of America is amazing. Nothing bad ever happened. And it's a white Christian nation where if you're white and Christian and straight, the world is your oyster. And the notion that Americans must acknowledge multiple realities at once, that George Washington was both a Revolutionary War hero and an enslaver who hired slave catchers to recapture his runaway property, is anathema to that worldview. And just think about, so that's old history, and then there's current or recent history. Think about all the shit that has gone on with Trump and Tucker Carlson and Kevin McCarthy and now Mike Johnson with regard to the 2020 election, and specifically with regard to January 6th, 2021, the insurrection at the Capitol. They keep releasing footage from the security cameras, and it's like it was Antifa and BLM. It was a guided tour. Cops just let everybody in. It was set up by the feds. To now it's an act of patriotism, and all the January 6th defendants are political prisoners. And here's the footage that shows all of these things. I mean, Trump supporters will believe absolutely anything but the truth. They will believe absolutely anything but the truth. Next article is the one by Anne Applebaum, who I absolutely adore as a writer. She wrote a book towards the beginning of Trump's presidency called The Twilight of Democracy. And again, it's a short book, but it's a book that I recommend highly, highly, highly to everyone. Timothy Snyder's On Tyranny and Anne Applebaum's Twilight of Democracy. She also wrote an amazing book called Gulag, which I think she got a Pulitzer Prize for. Extremely good writer, extremely smart, with a fascinating personal background herself. She's married to a guy who serves in a very high level in the government in Poland. And so she splits her time between Poland and the States. And given that her husband is very high up in the Polish government, because Poland has been kind of flirting with autocracy for several years recently. And fortunately, recently they had an election where, the left won a lot of elections across the country. And which is a really, really good thing, because they were backsliding pretty hard. And so that informs her perspective on a lot of the things that she writes about as it relates to the United States of America. Extremely good writer, extremely smart. I highly recommend Twilight of Democracy. And this is, Trump has stated repeatedly over the course of his first term, he doesn't like NATO. NATO is mean to Vladimir Putin. And all these Western European countries aren't paying their fair share anyway. They're a bunch of deadbeats, and why should we have to pay for them? And that's a simplistic, dumb, stupid economic argument that his supporters love. They identify with it because they're like, well, if I go out to dinner with somebody and we're supposed to split the tab and I end up paying 65 or 70% of the bill, that ain't fair. That ain't no good. That ain't fair. And that's the extent of the analysis that Trump supporters put into understanding the world and global relations. You're like, why should I pay more than you? That ain't fair. That ain't no good. It's just the Gomer class is going to be the death of us. I swear to God, man. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, I don't know if it's been signed by Biden yet, um, but the Senate and the House have passed a bill that would make it illegal and ineffective for any president to withdraw from NATO without congressional approval and without Senate approval. And so, they've made it virtually impossible for Trump uh, to withdraw from NATO unilaterally. I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but I'm not wearing pants. All right, let's talk about China and President Xi. It's very comfortable. I highly recommend it, especially if you're doing some, Zoom stuff or video conferencing. It's great. It's great to sit here and not wear pants, and everything is all chill and comfortable. Uh, and nobody knows unless you say something. And I'm also a little gassy tonight, but that's just because I had a burrito for lunch. Why President Xi wants Trump to win re-election. A second Trump term would allow China to cement its grip on the developing world. This article is by a guy named Michael Schumann, also a good writer. I mean, one of my favorite things about The Atlantic, I've subscribed to The Atlantic for a long time. I don't always agree with stuff that they have in their magazine, but they hire incredibly talented writers. And it's not just like people who have opinions that I agree with or disagree with, but people who are writers. And, regardless of their view, people who are capable of expressing those views in just beautiful, thought provoking prose. And 9 times out of 10, it's like if I'm reading an article in the Atlantic, it's just beautiful writing, and it comes through. And that's something that their editor, Jeffrey Goldberg, places a premium on when he's hiring staff. And it's just the quality of the writing itself in the Atlantic, I think, is a notch above most other publications. And as a writer or as a lawyer who writes a lot, quality writing is something that's important to me. So if you're looking for a good source for opinion stuff that is always thought provoking, and they have stuff on both sides. They have writers on both sides, but on the right, they have writers who are intellectually honest. Uh-oh. Anyway, China. Donald Trump was weird when it came to China, man. It's like he hated China. It was a trade war with China, and constantly referred to COVID as the China virus and the Kung Fu flu, and used incredibly racist terminology to talk about that stuff. And but at the same time, it's like he really, really admires President Xi, refers to him as straight out of central casting. He's very strong. He's very powerful, controls a nation of 1.5 billion people with an iron fist. And, and that's what Trump wants to do with the United States. And that's another thing that I've never, ever, ever understood. It's like, why does Donald Trump want to do that? Why does he want to be president again? Why does he want to control the United States of America? Why does he want to be a dictator? Because at the end of the day, he is just a fat, lazy, stupid slob. He is incredibly lazy. He didn't work at all when he was in the Oval Office, when he had the job of president. He didn't do the job. He was just a lazy slob eating quarter pounders all day. It's like, I love quarter pounders, or maybe Big Macs. I can't remember which one was his favorite. Shit, I might go get a Big Mac when this is over. I've never understood why he wanted the job, because he never ever wanted to do the job. I don't get it. I've never really understood that. Xi is watching world events right now. Xi is watching what's going on with Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And for 2 years, Xi has been watching what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, because off of his coast, President Xi has Taiwan, which has declared itself as an independent nation, which China and President Xi is like, no, you're part of China. And so President Xi is keeping a very close eye on what's going on with Ukraine and the world's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because at some point within the next 5 years, President Xi and China are going to invade Taiwan and try to take Taiwan and take over Taiwan and just say, no, now you are part of China. They basically did that in a nonviolent way with Hong Kong. I mean, there was violence at the street level with protesters and stuff, but Hong Kong's lost its independence. It is now part of mainland China. It always was geographically, but it was independent of China, and that is now gone. And that is because of President Xi. And, Xi wants Trump back in office again because Trump is stupid and lazy. And he just likes headlines. I'm tough on China. I put sanctions and tariffs. That's all he did. And that didn't really cause President Xi that many problems. Joe Biden has taken a much more effective, systemic, determined approach to dealing with China and has hurt their economy greatly, has barred U.S. companies from exporting information and chips to China, and is crippling them in a technological manner. While at the same time, Biden has been very much building alliances with Asian countries around China to lessen President Xi and China's influence within those countries. And that's all stuff that Donald Trump, I mean, can you imagine being one of Donald Trump's senior advisors in the Oval Office, and you're trying to explain to him the importance the the importance of building relationships with other Asian countries as a way to thwart China's influence in the world, and you're sitting there with all of this information, and it doesn't have any pictures in it, and he's like, what? I need a Diet Coke. I mean, Donald Trump doesn't care about that kind of shit. He doesn't care. He likes President Xi because President Xi is strong and tough and powerful and rules 1.5 billion people with an iron fist. And Donald Trump's like, oh, God, yeah, I want to do that. I want to do that. Oh, God, yeah. Sorry. Anywho, that concludes this evening's festivities on this latest episode of Hawk After Dark. Again, massive thanks goes out to my brother Falcon for all of his help with this stuff. And massive thanks goes out to our buddy Wiseacre for all of the incredible work that he has done with graphics and graphic design on so many things, especially for the graphic that's at the beginning and the end of these 3 podcasts. Hawk Droppings, Full Potato Friday, and Hawk After Dark, as well as so many of the things that you can see in our merch store at hawkmerchstore.com. And thank you to everyone who has subscribed to these podcasts. And if you're seeing this one, if you're seeing Hawk After Dark, that means you subscribed at $10 a month. That means the world to me and to my brother. We are deeply appreciative of all of you guys. Here, hang on. Let me put the beard back on here for a minute. All right, there we go. God, this is so unimaginably uncomfortable. You guys can't even fathom. And I'll do 3 more episodes next week, but today's the 15th, so we're about 10 days away from Christmas. So Merry Christmas, everyone. God bless all of us. And please, little baby Jesus, save us from Donald Trump. Which reminds me, Mary and Joseph were refugees, and they were just trying to sneak into a country so that they could drop an anchor baby and stay. So, I'm just saying. Anyway, Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a great holiday. Everybody stay safe. Thank you. We'll see you next time.